Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Reverend Charisma Jean-Marie, and I am the Director for Racial Justice Ministries at Scarritt Bennett Center here in Nashville, Tennessee. Scarritt Bennett Center sends our heartfelt condolences to all of the families mourning the loss of loved ones who died while in police custody. The traumatic death of George Floyd has awakened this nation's consciousness like never before. We hope to seek the kind of change that will prevent us from having to write a statement like this again. We stand firmly in solidarity with the Black and Brown community against the hatred and violence we see today, while recognizing that we have so much work to do as an organization. We acknowledge the tremendous responsibility in having to raise up the voices of Black leaders and leaders of color in our community. We also acknowledge the responsibility of designing and developing anti-racist educational spaces that truly reflect and respond to community needs. We are committed to living up to these responsibilities. We also seek to connect and collaborate with organizations and leaders who are committed to anti-racism work systemically and interpersonally. We commit ourselves to this work in eradicating racism so we all might leave a better world for our children. This afternoon is a special, exclusive, intimate conversation with one of our beloved activist young leaders in the city today. And so we're so grateful for the opportunity to help amplify her voice and hear her story. And so we're grateful that she accepted this invitation. To get started, I often say this is sacred space, this is safe space. And so we're grateful that you join us and welcome your comments and even questions in our comment sections. But Scarritt Bennett Center, our way is radical hospitality, and we believe in protecting our guests. And so while all comments are welcome and difference is welcome, difference does not mean hate or disrespect. So we ask that you respect our space and our guests. And so write your comments and questions, but any question or comment that reflects any kind of hate or disrespect will be deleted immediately. This afternoon, joining us is one of my co-laborers in this work at Scarritt Bennett Center, our beloved Anna Massey, who is the marketing manager. She'll be facilitating the questions this afternoon, and we're excited to have her join us on the call today. Thank you, Anna, for being here. Beloved, it is so good to have Jeneisha Harris. We'll hear from her, but let me introduce her beloved attorney Courtney Teasley here. Courtney, if you would just share a little bit about who you are and the work that you do and who you represent here in Nashville, Tennessee.
Okay, well, again, I'm Courtney Teasley, and I have my own law firm. It's the Courtney Teasley Law Firm. I am from Nashville, East Nashville, born and raised. I am a product of Metro Nashville Public Schools, and from there I went to MTSU. And from there, I went to Nashville School of Law. And so I have been practicing now for about 8 years. And actually, it's going on 8 years. And I am also an adjunct professor in the Criminal Justice Department for Tennessee State University. So outside of that, I only do criminal defense and personal injury work here in Nashville and surrounding counties, and all, you know, I'm licensed in Tennessee and licensed federally. Jeneisha is one of my revolutionary young clients, and I've been representing her for a few years now, and we always seem to get into some trouble, huh?
Good trouble.
Good trouble, and there's nothing wrong with good trouble. So that's all that's going on right here with me. So I'm here in support of Jeneisha and to bring attention to some of these challenges that we've been having during protesting.
Awesome, thank you, and we're so glad to have you, Attorney Teasley.
For having me.
Jeneisha Harris, it is so great to have you here this afternoon, and why don't we get started with you telling us a little bit about yourself, where you're from, tell us a little bit about your family member, and how did you get to Nashville and what led you to activism work?
Yes. Well, when people ask me to explain or describe myself, I always am left without words because I'm so multifaceted. But I will give you the short version. I am a student at Tennessee State University. I'm an organizer, a writer, and a self-proclaimed rebel. That's pretty much the short version of Jeneisha. Originally from Memphis, Tennessee, I grew up in a small but rich community called Orange Mound. And so I went to Melrose High School. From there, I went to Tennessee State University on a full ride scholarship. And I got into activism about a few years ago. And so I was doing all of these campaigns at first. So I became an ambassador for the White House under Obama's last administration. I had all of these accolades on campus and off campus, within the political world in Nashville and Memphis. And I remember sitting behind my desk at Congressman Cohen's office where I interned in the summer of 2017. And I just thought to myself, there has to be more. And so I got into activism shortly after. I started organizing with some students here in Nashville, and I've been a rebel ever since.
Yeah, we're grateful for rebels these days. Share with us a little bit about who are your mentors, folks who influence and support your work.
Yes, I love talking about my mentors. The first one I will highlight is Kwame Lillard. He was, we like to say that we are fighting the same fight, but it looks different. And we are enjoying a lot of the freedoms that they fought for. Mr. Kwame marched with and organized with SNCC, with John Lewis, with Diane Nash. He was a part of the integration of the lunch counters here in 1960. And so after I was arrested the first time, we connected and we've been stuck like glue ever since. Gia Hardaway, who was the state representative here in Tennessee. Of course, my amazing lawyer, Miss Courtney Teasley, who is just, I just love her so much. She's such an inspiration. My pastor, Pastor William, and Rashida Fatuga from Gideon's Army.
Awesome. I heard you talk about Kwame at the last demonstration,
Yes.
about 2 weeks ago, when you talked about the 60-year difference, right? And yet y'all both are fighting for the same thing still. Talk a little bit about that. Talk a little bit about the ways in which his mentorship has influenced your work, because the work he did, right, 60 years ago is still the same work you're doing now. So it's almost like he's passing the baton. Would you talk a little bit about
Yes.
that for us?
Well, Mr. Kwame always highlights that one of the mistakes of their movement was the failure to pass the baton. And so we've been spending all of this time, and he's even told me that he's spending this intentional time with me because he feels guilty in a sense. Let's think about Diane Nash. She went off to the aftermath of the Vietnam War. John Lewis went to Atlanta to pursue, a career in politics. And then Mr. Kwame went to New York to pursue his master's degree. And he started doing work and organizing with Malcolm X. And so they all left without passing the baton. And so I think the work that I'm doing, I don't want to be doing in 5 years. I do have people that I am literally training up that I plan to pass the baton to once my time is up within this work. But to answer your question, I feel like, well, I know that we are fighting the same fight. Malcolm X has a quote that says, racism is like a Cadillac. They come out with a new version every single year. And so we have these freedoms that is a false illusion of progression. We can go to school with whoever we want. We can marry whoever we want. Those things were illegal 50 years ago. Now we can do those things, and now we feel like we have freedom that we really don't have. And so the fight that we are fighting is the same fight. It looks different. It talks different. The policies are different. They even kill us a little differently, but the racism is still the same. And so I want people to know that although we have degrees, we have, the freedoms that, are these false illusions of progression, we are still fighting the same fight. It just looks different.
Yeah. Wow, that's really powerful. And speaking of fighting the same fight, tell us about the first time you heard about what happened to our beloved George Floyd. Where were you? When was the first time you heard about what happened? How did you feel about what happened, and what was your response?
Yes, so if I can, in this moment, I would like to pause to remember George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, Sean Reed, and so many other people who were callously taken away from us due. I'm sorry, I got disconnected. Let's just pause for a few moments, if we will. All right, thank you. I get so emotional and shaken up when I talk about this. Okay, give me a second. I did not want to watch the video at first. On top of the trauma that I personally have with the police, I did not want to be reminded of traumatic events that I have to relive. And then it kept getting shared and shared and shared, and I finally pressed play, and I regret it so much because for 9 minutes, the police officer put his knee on his neck, and he couldn't breathe, and he called out for his deceased mother, who's no longer here. He knew that she was no longer here, but he called her anyway. And so that speaks to the fact that he knew I could die, and he did. And so it's just incredibly sad. I honestly, when people ask me that question, I honestly do not have words to express what I feel.
And while we are still sitting with that traumatic experience on top of other traumatic experiences, yet we do not have, we as in Black folks, the Black community, Black leaders and activists like yourself, we can't afford not to respond. We might not have words, but we cannot afford to not respond. And so share with us a little bit in terms of what was your first reactions, how did you respond? What did you know in terms of how this city needs to respond as it relates to the very killing of George Floyd?
I think it's very simple. I think silence is violence. Not only is silence violence, but so is action. Well, the lack of action. I urge Mayor Cooper to make a statement. We haven't even heard from our own mayor in a city where people like William Johnson Jr. was just murdered by Metro Police Department 2 weeks ago. And so I urge people to speak out, to make statements, and also follow up with those statements with action.
Good job. Yeah. Share with us a little bit of how you and others begin to mobilize and organize the protests in Nashville. It was one of the most successful protests, and Nashville is known for well organizing demonstrations and protests. So share a little bit about the leadership and organizing that went on behind the scenes to experience such a public protest that was very successful these last few weeks.
Yes, if I can, I'll start off with a protest, well, a multitude of protests that we did last February in light of Black History Month. Students from TSU, from Fisk, from Vanderbilt, we all got together and we had this idea to mobilize our voices. At the time, the bus around the Nathan Bedford Forrest bus that sits in the state capitol was a hot topic. And so we wanted to maximize that issue. So we met up, we picked the issues, we sorted through them, and the Nathan Bedford Forrest statue was the most important one to each of us. And so we had a month-long series of protests. So exhausting, but we got it done. So the first week, I remember we brought an actual casket up to the steps of the Capitol. Imagine a casket at the footsteps of the Capitol. But we wanted to make a drastic statement of the things that we were experiencing going to the Capitol so much. So we would see all of these pictures and accolades of all of these people and murderers, if you will, throughout the Capitol, but where are the slaves? Where are the Black people that had a part in building the Capitol? There are slaves that built the Capitol, but are not recognized inside of the Capitol. And so we wanted to honor and commemorate them and give them a proper burial service. With the casket, we marched from the Capitol to a nearby church. We had a service for them, and we did an action. The second week, we had a sit-in to commemorate the 59th anniversary of the sit-ins that my mentor, Mr. Kwame, participated in. That was powerful. We had a letter drop off to the governor's office, which he threw away, but that's okay. We had 4 weeks consecutively of protesting, and that really maximized our voices here in Nashville. And so that's how I got started with organizing and activism in totality here in the state. So it was a very difficult process, especially having class and working full time. We would literally be up until 4 a.m. and having to do things at 7 o'clock. But it was worth it. We didn't get what we wanted accomplished. The fight still goes on to get the bust of Nathan Bedford Forrest removed from the Capitol. We're still working on that, but we did get a response from the governor, and he has not responded on that issue to anybody. So that was a small win.
Mm-hmm. It's so good to hear that your work started way before the video that was released with George Floyd. And so, because I think why that's important, because I think, you know, and I said it earlier in our statement, I think right now what we're seeing is the nation is waking up to a level of consciousness that has not been there before. But people like you have been doing this work way before another killing. And here's the reality: we don't need another killing in order for our brothers and sisters in this world, in this country, to wake up. And so it's good to hear that people are like you are constantly doing this work for equity and inclusion, but also for the proper commemoration of our enslaved ancestors, right?
Yeah.
Thank you for your work and your prophetic work in this hour. Tell us a little bit of why you and others felt it was important to, organize a protest, a demonstration in the city as it related to the killing of George Floyd.
Yes, so many people have so much criticism about protests. But if we look at the uprisings across the country, and if we look at cities like Minneapolis and LA who are taking the steps to actually defund their police forces, that did not come from them sitting and making those decisions for themselves. That came by force from these uprisings. And so if you look at history and if you study history, protests are essential. They are an essential part of the movement. Without protests, people do not know what you're angry about. They don't know what you want. They don't know your demands. Obviously, social media, it's almost a new protest. Social media amplifies our message just as well as protests do, but I think they are so essential. And let's look at 2020, for example. Defund the police would not be possible. We would not even be talking about defunding the police without the impact of these protests. So I think they are so essential.
Yeah. Speaking of police, I know you had some run-ins with police last week, but like you shared before, not the first time. So why don't you share a little bit about your personal experience with the run-in with police as an activist, and why do you think that is part of the risk activists take, right, in doing this work? Because it is a risk. Right? I think sometimes people get caught up in this idea that you're in the front and you got the mic and you get this popularity, but folks don't understand the threats that you get, right? The intimidations that come with it, the risk for your very life, right? In being in the forefront. So share a little bit with us. Give us a little window to your experience with, specifically with police as a Black woman activist in the city.
Yes, I tell people often when people ask me, well, what made you do this work? What started your activism? And I'm a very honest and transparent leader. I don't try to sugarcoat things to make myself look a certain way, but I always say that I do not think that I that I wanted to do this work. I believe that this work called me by name. If I could choose an easy life, I will be honest, I would choose an easy life. This is not an easy life. I've had to get security. I've had to get people to protect me, for people wanting to hurt me and take my life for speaking out. And people forget that I'm 23 years old. I'm still a student. And so as an activist, a Black young woman activist, it's been extremely hard. I have an amazing support system, my lawyer, my family, my friends, my comrades. But I will be honest in saying that it gets hard, and sometimes I want to quit, and sometimes I don't want the mic, and sometimes I don't want to speak. But I think that the work keeps calling me for a bigger purpose of the movement. So yeah, could you go back to your original question?
Yeah, share with us your run-in with police.
Yes, that was your original question. So the first time I was arrested at a Marsha Blackburn event. And so we walked in, long story short, we walked in, our names were on the list. We registered and everything. Nobody knew what we were there to do. And immediately we were racially profiled. We were the only Black students, the only Black people there. It's about 3 or 4 of us. And we were told to leave immediately. And so that was the first run-in. We were arrested because we didn't want to move in the spirit of Rosa Parks. We refused to move. The second time was the month-long protest that I told you about. The 4th protest, the last protest to end the month, ended in my second arrest. And then the third time, well, not the third time, but more recently, a warrant was sent out for my arrest after me speaking at a protest and them trying to charge me with felony aggravated rioting. Can't forget the felony part.
I'm going to bring in your attorney, Attorney Courtney Teasley. And would you talk a little bit about last week in the run-in? There's just so many different stories out there. There was a SWAT team sent to her home. She was arrested. She wasn't arrested. The warrant was recalled. Could you just share with us a little bit about what happened and what are the legal ramifications to what happened?
Well, what happened is I think we all know the news media on Facebook, Scoop Nashville. And that's where I saw it first. So when Jeneisha called me and immediately like, it's happening again. And I'm like, oh Lord, what? Because I saw the protest was peaceful and I know she's a peaceful protester. So I go trying to hurry up and look up the information, and it's on Scoop Nashville, which was really unusual. It was unusual because usually Scoop will only post after usually when I see it, it's only after someone has been arrested. And so they'll post their mugshot and then they'll post what they got arrested for. But this was different because it was posted her warrant. And it actually listed out what they thought she had done, which was step on a police car, her and Justin, and they further damaged it by stepping on it or whatever. So I immediately, she's like, there's something out there about the SWAT team. Multiple people have said something about the SWAT team, something about Justin Jones, whether it was at his house, and then someone had seen it come to her own place of residence. So immediately we're like, what is going on? Because that's big. If you're sending the SWAT team to come arrest, and then I'm looking into it, it's just aggravated rioting, which is what they've been charging everybody with after the protest, and that's the E-felony. And so I didn't understand why she was charged with an E-felony because, there's misdemeanor rioting as well. So anywho, I go and I'm looking into it, and then I meet her down there. And when I meet her down there to turn herself in, somehow, I end up talking with the DA and whatnot, and they're working on rescinding the warrants. Well, we don't know anything at this time. We don't even know why this is happening. We just know that, okay, they're rescinding the warrants. And so I'm like, okay, we stay. I'm down there ready to argue to the commissioner for her not to have a $32,500 bond, which is what they've been setting everybody's. And so they rescinded it. We end up leaving, and that was that. But the problem is, after I saw the evidence afterwards, because I had a video of her peacefully protesting right where they were talking about. I had my own video. But then later I found another video, which is what we believe Metro had the entire time. And that actually showed a fuller picture of everything that occurred. It showed her and Justin being just as peaceful. And as soon as they got down, somebody started smashing the car, kicking it and everything. It was undamaged when they were on it. So I was further disturbed that they would have that and still swear out warrants against her. So that was our immediate thoughts. And the only thing that we could come up with is the Teens for Equality were protesting that day. And there was another protest going on. We thought it was some kind of deterrent. You were trying to send a message that you need to chill out. And that's exactly how we received that.
Do you feel like a target, Jeneisha?
Say it again, I'm sorry.
Do you feel like a target?
Absolutely.
Could you say more about that? What does that mean to live the kind of life you live feeling like a target? What does that mean?
It is not a good feeling. I think the state of Tennessee specifically is trying to silence my activism and honestly make an example out of me. But I won't be silent. I will continue to do the work peacefully. And that's just my take.
What stories or what advice is your mentor Kwame sharing with you about this idea that people are trying to silence you? That notion or even that act is not new, right? Many of our leaders like Kwame have been targets before, and folks, the government, the state, folks tried to silence them. So what advice is he giving you around this particular issue here?
Yes, Mr. Kwame, if I can, I will share. I get so excited when he shares stories with me that I can share to other people. But he shared with me this story of when Dr. King came, when his famous visit to Nashville, he met with the Freedom Riders, with Diane, with John, with him, and he gave them money to actually use as bus fare for the Freedom Rides. And somebody told him to stop, like, oh, that's too much money, you shouldn't be doing that. And Dr. King looked at the person and he gave it to them anyway. And he always tells me, what if he did not give us that money because of what somebody else said? Because we were broke college students. How would we get on the bus? How would we take that action? And how would things have been differently if we were not able to get on the bus? And if Dr. King didn't give us the fare to get on the bus. And so that sticks with me. And my motto was do it anyway. If you get arrested, do it anyway. If you get the scrutiny from the public, do it anyway. As long as it's respectful and peaceful, do it anyway.
Yeah. I'm thinking of Audre Lorde, who says, when you speak and you are afraid, but if you don't speak, you're still afraid, so speak anyway. So you speak.
Yes.
It's what I'm thinking of. And I'm smiling because I'm excited to share, and some may already know this, one of our intimate histories at Scarritt Bennett is when Martin Luther King visited Nashville. It was at our Untitled Chapter on our campus where Martin Luther King actually spoke because the Vanderbilt would not allow for him to speak on campus. And so Scarritt Bennett, which was a college at the time, opened up our doors so that Martin Luther King can speak on our campus. So it's one of our intimate history with the civil rights movement in Nashville that we're really truly proud about here at Scarritt Bennett Center. Let's talk a little bit about what you as an activist think is some of the urgent needs as it relates to policing in Nashville. So I want to shift gears a little bit and talk more about how, as an activist and a leader, how you perceive some of the urgent needs in policing in Nashville. What are your thoughts?
Absolutely. I say three things. body cams. Mayor Cooper just made an announcement a few days ago that, Metro Police Department will now be getting body cams. Number 2, effective de-escalation tactics. And number 3, mental health training. A lot of times we don't talk about the Black bodies who had mental health issues that were killed by the police. And so those three things: body cams, mental health training, effective de-escalation tactics, are all ways to make a start with policing here in Nashville. But I often think about reform and how it's not as beneficial as we think it is, because you can reform the police force, but how will you reform the minds of the police? You can reform and defund and divest all you want, but what about the racist mentality of the police officers? And that leads me to abolition. I am for complete abolition of the police force, of all police forces across the world, not only the United States. What that replacement looks like could be community policing. The technicalities of that obviously would have to be worked out. But I think that defunding the police is a good first step at complete abolition. I think that we have to baby step our way into abolition. Abolition sounds great. I'm for it. I'm pro abolition, but I think we have to baby step our way into it so that we can be safe within our own communities. So I think that defunding the police is a great first step, but it should not be the only step. I think we're hearing a lot of talk about defunding the police, and I don't really hear a lot of talk about abolition. I personally feel like abolition is what will be a part of our liberation. I do not see a lower budgeted police force a part of our freedom. So I think that is a good first step to complete abolition.
You're right. There's a whole lot of conversation around defunding police. It's actually now a chant in many of the protests and demonstrations throughout the states that we're seeing. But for the person who's watching who might not fully understand what that means, would you speak in detail? What are the implications? What does it really mean when we hear defund police? What does that mean? What are the implications in our community and in the future law enforcement in Nashville?
Absolutely. So defunding the police is simply divesting funds from the police force and putting those resources into the community in the form of services and programming. Abolishing the police force is basically dismantling the whole system and creating something new from scratch. And so we've never seen either before. Which is why both are new conversations, but that is the difference. And I think people misconstrue the two and kind of, mix them together, but defunding the police is divesting and abolishing the police is dismantling it. We look at LA, that's a great example of defunding the police. Their mayor, Eric, can't pronounce his last name, I don't want to screw it up, but he pledged to defund $150 million. But the catch to that is LA is a really big city and they have a $1 billion police budget. And so 150 million from 1 billion actually is not a lot. And so we have to look at, well, how big is Nashville's budget? How much will Mayor Cooper potentially divest? And so I think 150 million sounds like a lot, but in comparison to 1 billion, it's really not.
Mm-hmm. So defunding police is really about the budget. It
yes.
really is talking about the ways in which the city, share funds the various different needs in the community. And so defunding police is suggesting that police don't really need that much money, right? Mm-hmm. And so we can use that money in other ways in our community, like education and healthcare. Is that correct?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. All right.
Absolutely.
Let's talk about what organizations and community leaders in the city. You talked a lot about some of your mentors, but let's talk about organizations and leaders in the city doing this particular work and moving racial justice work forward. Who are those organizations and who are the people that's in the front line doing this work?
Yes, some of my comrades that are leading these organizations, Denzel Caldwell, who's the president of Black Lives Matter, Rashida Fatuga, who's the founder of Gideon's Army. You have Mike Drew, you have Hambino, you have Larry Turner, who all work for Gideon's Army, who are violence interrupters. You have the Water Bear Project, which focus on the holistic aspect of activism. It's a new organization, the Water Bear Project. We have the Nashville Community Bail Fund, which frees people at no expense, protesters that is, the Nashville Economic Alliance, Free Hearts, and pro bono protection. That is something that was created by my lawyer, Ms. Courtney Teasley, and it's basically pro bono work. I have not paid a dime to my lawyer in the past 2 years, and I could not have afforded her as a college student, as a young person, by myself. I actually just sent her a little something of appreciation, and she was like, no, don't send me anything. And I just wanted to so badly, because she's been representing me for 2 years, a little bit more than 2 years, almost 3 years, pro bono. And a lot of other people, protesters, activists, organizers, do not have that luxury of having a lawyer on speed dial when they are in need of representation. So I want to amplify pro bono protection, and Ms. Courtney can even speak to that a little bit more.
I want to bring you in, Attorney Teasley. Let's talk more about this work, this pro bono work that you're doing. Talk a little bit about what it is and why is it important in the work that you do as a lawyer in the city.
Well, again, you know, I was telling you I'm an adjunct at TSU, and I'm in the criminal justice department. We never met at TSU, me and Jeneisha. We met outside of TSU, but I've always represented students who needed it, you know, for free if they needed it, you know, and also I'm a mock trial coach I was a mock trial coach at Stratford, and so helping students is just something that I normally do. But when the protest started, I got introduced to Jeneisha through one of my colleagues in Memphis, Carlissa, and we went to MTSU together, and she reached out to me and she said, hey, I have one of my little mentees and she needs some help. And so then I immediately jumped in because, you know, we're all Black women, and you have another young Black woman trying to just stand up for what's right, yet she keeps being, you know, keeps meeting doors that we're all too familiar with. And so then I jump in, and from there is history. Well, when it came to this situation with George Floyd, it brought out a bigger group of protesters, you know, because when I first met Jeneisha, again, she's been protesting for a long time. And it was just her and maybe, I know Justin got arrested before. And so there wasn't a huge need for a lot of lawyers at that time, because it was just a few of them that could be handled easily. And but this time was different, because when Jeneisha and all of this started happening around the world, people were protesting. It was bigger. It's way bigger than just Nashville. It's bigger than Minneapolis. It's bigger than every single city here. People all over the country are protesting, and they're actually saying, what about our George Floyds? We're gonna protest George Floyd, but now, yes, and some people will say, oh, well, y'all didn't protest when it happened. It doesn't matter. We're protesting our George Floyds now. Now is the time. So I said to myself, I was like, listen, you know, there's a lot more people. It was about a couple of people kept calling. They were like, hey, I'm going to jail, or this bond is this much. And then I started to look into it, and I was like, hold on. Everybody's being charged for aggravated rioting. And it's an felony. And then I was like, well, how are they charging these people? Well, they're looking at the videos that are posted, and they're jacking up their bonds all the way. And in my mind, I'm like, okay, well, the only reason because you're trying to deter I guess what occurred in Minneapolis, you know, because when the courthouse was set on fire or whatever, and they're trying to show people like, no, we're not going to do this here. And so I told Jeneisha, I said, you know what? I was there for Jeneisha, and then I started just doing a call to action for all my other colleagues. Like, hey guys, you know, I'm not a public defender. I'm a private lawyer. But the public defender's office is always there. They already have their cases they have to worry about. They're already at capacity. You know, come on, lawyers, let's come together and be here, a line of protection around the ones that do not have, well, actually, it doesn't matter if they have funds. We're not even going to ask them. We don't even want it to be about that. You're protesting for this cause. You are for Black lives, and we're here for you. So I created this Facebook group, and I'm trying to get people, lawyers around the world, to join pro bono protection so people know where they can go if they do get arrested. That they can go here and say, oh, hey, guys, I got arrested. I need a lawyer, and I'm in this state. Boom, somebody can jump into action. So, you know, it's bigger than us right now. It's not about making money at this time. We make money all the time. So the thing is, it's about time to give back. And so I did a call to action with the Tennessee rules of professional responsibility. Most all states have their own rules of professional responsibility. All of them do. And they usually ask us to give 50 hours of community service work. Well, I know a lot of lawyers that go above and beyond that. And I know some that may, you know, maybe don't. Well, my call to action is to say, hey, y'all, now is the time. Let's go above these 50 hours of community service work, and let's actually make a difference. When this comes back around, I don't want to be remembered as just standing by, you know, charging somebody the money for some stuff that I could easily step in for and write off.
So how can we support this work? For the folks who are watching who are saying, this is amazing, what an amazing vision, and it is an amazing vision, and appreciate Attorney Teasley, your passion. How can someone who is watching who say, I still have not found a way to support this work, and I really want to support this work, how can they support this particular work that you're leading with the pro bono work?
Well, my call to action has just been to lawyers at this point. We don't have anything that we're trying to take up money yet or do anything of that nature. I'm just calling lawyers who are, if you know a lawyer, if you do some kind of law, I don't care if it's criminal work, it can be any type of law. We need you. We just want you to give some of your time right now. That's it. We want you to give up your time. I mean, hey, a protester calls or a protester needs somebody to go to the police station with them. We have to go because guess what? They jack their bonds up. That's not a normal felony bond of $32,500. That's not normal because a bond is not supposed to punish. A bond just makes sure you show back up to court. So why would you give me a $32,500 bond for an felony? There was a young man who was arrested at the Nashville Community Bail Fund got out. And so that's a way you can donate to the Nashville Community Bail Fund. They got him out of jail, a young man, 18 years old, just getting out of high school, no record. They charged him with aggravated rioting, and you put his bond up at $32,500 and another 32. So he has this very high bond, and he has absolutely no record. And you would see people who are white or whatnot get felonies and they're released on their own recognizance. Some low so you know there are people who are in there on a murder. You know, it could be $25,000 or something. It was a girl who, I don't know if you remember that girl who killed that homeless man in Nashville a little bit ago. She had like a real low bond, $50,000, I think, immediately. So it's crazy that we will be protesting for change and protesting for our lives and saying Mayor of Nashville, who has not made a statement to us, who has not even said, hey, we're going to ban the strangulation tactics. We're going to ban that. We're going to say, hey, guys, let's not, you know, we're not going to hire cops that have a history of racist behavior, or, hey, we're going to just, you didn't say a thing to us. And so you have a group of people that are just frustrated and don't understand and are trying to protest to get your attention, and you're going to lock them up on a $32,500 bond for an felony and stack them up and make it $75,000. And then when it's over $70,000 in Nashville, you have to make a source. So you got to show where that money comes from. You got to show it doesn't come from illegal funds. Yeah, we need lawyers. We need people who are ready to step up and say, that is not right. That's not.
How can lawyers contact you? For the lawyers who are watching, how can lawyers contact you to join your work?
There is a Facebook group. It is called Pro Bono Protection. It is a public group. So just type in pro bono protection and it's in there. Just join it. There is one of my line sisters, her name is Michelle Israel. She created a logo, and it is a logo of the scales of justice with a hand, a black hand holding it, and it's blood running from it, because it is my call for us to grab those scales of justice so hard that the blood from our ancestors runs down. We are gonna squeeze justice from these scales. So that's it. Go to pro bono protection. Go to you can go to my Facebook page at C Teasley Law Firm. If you can't find it, reach out to me. I'll put you on this list. We're organizing for a cause here.
Awesome. Jeneisha, I want to bring you back in. A few days
Yes.
ago, I saw you wrote a post saying that, your warrant was recalled, and all of the people who actually donated to your bail, that you wanted to redirect those funds. Talk a little bit more about that. Talk a little bit more about the recall of the warrant and how much support you got from the community, how people just came and poured down funds for your bail money, but then how you redirected to the various different organizations you thought was important.
Yes, I received an overwhelming amount of support when my information was shared. I remember calling Miss Courtney, I called my family, and I called my best friend, and she shared my Cash App. And so people just flooded with donations of support. And when I literally prepared myself to go to jail that day. And so Miss Courtney can attest to this. I was so excited when I did not have to go and experience that traumatic experience all over again. And I thought it would be a good idea to redirect the funds to the community bail fund here in Nashville. They were prepared to make thousands of dollars of bonds for just me. There are people who they bail out who have $6,000, $7,000, $5,000 bonds. Well, $50,000, and then you pay the 10%. That's $5,000. That's a lot of money for one person. And so I wanted to redirect the funds. I donated $1,000 to the National Community Bail Fund. I am releasing shirts on my website, Free Jeneisha. Some of those proceeds will go to the National Community Bail Fund as well. So I'm really excited about that, to give back in that way. I also donated to Gideon's Army, to Free Hearts Organization, to the Nashville Justice Economic Alliance, to Black Lives Matter, and the Nation of Islam. So I'm really proud of the decision that I made to be responsible with the money.
Absolutely. Talk a little bit about the Nashville Community Bail Fund. I think that is because Attorney Teasley, you talked about how so many people, particularly black and brown people who get arrested, and their bail fund is just so disproportionately unfair compared to white folks who commit crimes, and their bail seem to be lower. So that Nashville Community Bail Fund is in need because of the disproportionate ways that Black people are consistently getting hit, right, in the criminal justice system. So would you share a little bit, either one of you, about what is the Nashville Community Bail Fund, and how can people donate to that particular fund, and why people should donate to that particular fund?
You start, Jeneisha. You want me to start?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, I am pulling up their information right now. If you would like to donate, well, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Okay, they are the Nashville Community Bail Fund on all social media platforms, Twitter, on Instagram, on Facebook, but their website is nashvillebailfund.org. And if you click the donate link, it'll take you to a PayPal link, and you can make direct donations from there. So yeah.
Why is that important, Attorney Teasley? Why is it important for us as citizens to support that particular fund?
Well, I think in this right here, it goes hand in hand with what I'm saying about protesters being unjust, well, they're being arrested, and maybe they have done something, misdemeanor, felony, whatever the thing may be, but you're jacking their bonds way up, and it's sad, So the National Community Bail Fund is there bring those funds and bail you out, you know, and it helps when it helps us reach more people. The money can be spread across more people if we have lawyers and people ready to go in there and file these motions to reduce their bonds, or go with them to turn themselves in and ask for these lower bonds. But either way, if you get locked up and you've been protesting whatnot, the Nashville Community Bail Fund, if you donate to them, then the Nashville Community Bail Fund can use those funds to go and get a person who has been locked up and bond unjustly raised so high just to ensure that they sit there. They can come out of jail.
Yeah. And for more information on the pro bono protection, we have links on our comment. For more information about the Nashville Community Bail Fund, we have links on our comments for those who are seeking more information about how do we support this. Jeneisha, I want to hear from you. In your opinion, you know, we've been marching for the last 3 weeks. We've been having protests and demonstrations in the city, not just in the city, all over the country. And I was in conversation with a colleague of mine from Ghana yesterday, and she shared that it's not just in America, it's actually globally, right? In Ghana, George Floyd's name is lifting up, and her 83-year-old grandmother is asking the question, why did they kill George Floyd, right? They're asking the question in the streets, protesting all over the world. So this is globally, right? Something within us has awakened, right? And there's definitely a need, there's definitely a place and a need for protesting and demonstration. But my question to you is, particularly in Nashville, in your opinion, what do you think is next for the city? Now that we've gained this attention and people who've been asleep and blind, they see now, they're awakened. What's next in your opinion? Where do we go from here?
Well, I'd like to say Malcolm, well, if you don't know who my favorite leader by now, you can tell by my quotes because I quote Malcolm X so much, but Malcolm X has a quote and he talks about how the biggest mistake of the movement is trying to organize a sleeping people. You have to wake the people up first and then you'll get action. And I believe that people are now understanding how these issues work. They've seen the protests. They've seen me rant about, you know, the injustices in Nashville and Tennessee for years now. They've seen this all over again, video after video, time after time. But what's different about now is that people are now finally waking up. They're researching, they're reading books, they're reading articles, and they know how the issues work. And I believe that in order to do the work, you have to learn how the issues work. And so I feel like people are now awakening to the evils of white supremacy and the system and how it works. And I think that's the difference between previous protests and now. But I think the first steps for Nashville, number one, would be I think for me personally, I know that I am due an apology from the entire state of Tennessee, from Nashville, from Mayor Cooper and Metro Nashville Police Department. They had video evidence of me peacefully protesting, and they still decided to put a warrant out for my arrest. And that tells something about the morality of the police here in Nashville. It says something about the morality of Nashville and the morality of this entire state. And so first things first, for me personally, I am due an apology. Mayor Cooper, I'm calling on you. I'm urging you, not begging, but I am owed an apology. The scrutiny, the shame was public, and the apology should be public too. And so number two would be to fire, remove Chief Anderson. I don't have to go down a long list of the atrocities under his administration, but fire Chief Anderson. And number three, talk about in detail with leaders, with the people. I know the Nashville People's Budget, you can find them on the NashvillePeoplesBudget.com, I believe. They're doing a survey to get the opinions and feedback of all Nashvillians across the city to figure out, do we want reform? Do we want to defund the police? Do we want to abolish the police? And so that's a great survey to collect the data to figure out what are the next steps. But number one, for me, that's an apology. Number two, that's removing Chief Anderson. And number three, that's working with city officials and the people to figure out what does defunding the police look like in Nashville, and how can we move forward to complete abolition?
Awesome.
Can I chime in on that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so my I think that I love all of that. I love all of those steps. And my first thoughts in this, after that, what we were talking about earlier, Jeneisha, with the, with the first steps, you're talking about the apology. But one thing I think we are also needing from Nashville is give us something. Show us that you actually care about Black lives. Show us that you care about our own George Floyd's. Like you were just saying, under Chief Steve Anderson's commission, we've seen our George Floyd's. We have Jacquees Clemens. We have Daniel Hambrick. We have the William Johnson. We have the Timothy Lane. You've seen this under his leadership. And so I think that our mayor needs to speak out against the chokehold. He needs to speak out in favor of de-escalation. He needs to speak out and do something. We saw at the mayor in Houston, he signed an executive order the same day, warning before you shoot, duty to intervene, exhaust all alternatives before shooting. Those are bare minimum things we're asking for just to make Black lives feel comfortable. That's all. It's the bare minimum we're asking for. And I think that he did the bare minimum, which was, oh, you did this. Let me tell. Oh, Obama said reform. We'll look at the reform, and we'll look at this and look at that. You didn't even give a timeline. You said that you would do this, and we just need more. Those body cams, we already had the funding for it a long time ago, even though you told us we did not.
Yeah,
you had that funding a long time ago. It's funny how all of a sudden it can roll out right now. You had that funding, you withheld it from us. And so the thing is, were you doing that because Chief Steve Anderson didn't want it? We don't know, but here's the kicker. We need more than these body cams that we already had. We need something. Protection. Do you care?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that. I'm bringing back Anna, who's going to come and facilitate the questions. We have some questions from the audience. And so, yeah, here come Anna with questions from the audience.
Yes, thank you. Thank you both so much. This has just been absolutely incredible. And we're so grateful at Scarritt Bennett for your time and for your honesty. I am a little bit curious, since we're kind of on this conversation about police interactions. Jeneisha, earlier you talked a little bit about defunding the police, abolishing the police, and you also mentioned the Nashville People's Budget. I'm just really curious. We had one question of, if Nashville police were abolished or if it were heavily defunded, where do you think that money should go instead?
I think that money should go into public education. It should go into resources, youth programs for the community. Specifically, North Nashville 37208 has the highest incarceration rate in all of the country. And so I think it should go into resources like that.
That's right.
And Courtney, I'm curious as well, from your perspective, where do you think that money should go instead?
Well, I think that money should definitely go, and I guess this is from my legal standpoint, I think the money should definitely go to the public defender's office. I think that they should have more resources. I feel like that they should get paid more. They have a heavy job. And I definitely think that attorneys in general who take appointed work should probably get paid more as well. But bigger than that, the organizations, I think it should go to these organizations that are for de-escalation and that are doing things of that nature. So again, Gideon's Army is a huge one. The money definitely needs to go there. The community bail fund, things of that nature. So I think it should go into training. Organizations that are training police, organizations that are training judges too, district attorneys and things of that nature. So we don't have these kind of charges and things going on. Just because you do have the power don't mean you should exercise it in that way. So things of that nature.
And Attorney Teasley, that actually is a great segue into a kind of a second question that we had, that you talked a little bit about, rallying different attorneys to do pro bono work. Let's say that someone is a protester in a city where you aren't, you know, and they're, you know, so they get arrested. Let's say they already have a bond fund in that city, so their bond is paid, but the charges aren't dropped. So can you just talk through, for a protester who's arrested, that maybe their bond is paid by a local organization, what are the steps to finding help, legal help, and then what should they expect after that?
Right. Okay, so first thing, obviously that is what I am trying to create for the world, or short term, the US people here, a group where you can immediately go to and find some sort of attorney and say, hey, I'm in this state, there's attorneys here, and an attorney in that state can respond and say, hey, I got you. But without that, I would say the first thing is you have to look into your legal aid societies. You have to look to the NAACP. They have a legal defense fund. And you also obviously have public defenders and whatnot. But I am hoping to have a place where you can go and find yourself a lawyer immediately, where you don't have to take all the time filling out the paperwork and seeing if you qualify and doing those things. You're arrested for protesting. You are arrested for bravely intervening into a police using some kind of technique that's going to kill someone. Boom, here's your lawyer right here. Put it in here. Somebody will come and represent you. So, but outside of that, if you know, we don't have the people yet who have joined it, who are from all over different states. So they would have to look to their different resources. Those would be those places I would say go first. But then also go on Facebook, get pro bono, and then put in your state. And then there may be some groups there, maybe some groups that people have already started.
That's excellent. That's really good to know. And even just kind of while we're on this topic, I'd love to hear from both of you. How do we abolish cash bail? Do you recommend that? And what are the alternatives that you two recommend instead?
I have a side note. In that question that you asked, what happens if your bond is paid but the charges aren't dropped? To finish that, it's, you know, the bond is just there. Your charges may not be dropped. That's fine. Your bond is just there to make sure that you appear to court or whatnot. So as long as you appear to court and whatnot, they get that money back at the end of the case. So yeah, if you show up like you're supposed to, you don't go on the run and things like that, the bail funding people, they will get that money back if you do not, you know, abscond.
That's very good to know. I am the daughter of a lawyer and I didn't even know that. So cash bail, do you recommend abolishing cash bail? What alternatives do you recommend in their place?
Definitely. I definitely do. I think that bail a lot of times is used to punish, well, not a lot of times, it's used to punish the poor. You know, you do something, they don't like it, here's this high bond, sit your butt in jail, you can't afford it. You don't look into the fact that obviously you could have a monitor, you could have so many different avenues. You could have someone that you check in with, you could have a probation officer that you check in with. I know the federal, they do that. You don't get to pay a bond. It's like, you know, hey, you can either get out or you're not. And you have to check in with a probation officer every month and whatnot, and check in and do like you're supposed to do. I think if there's nothing that suggests that you would abscond or that you have ever jumped bail, or you don't show up to court, or you do anything of that nature, there's nothing to suggest that. I don't think there's a reason for that. There's no reason for you to have that, because the bond is only there for you to show up to court. So I just think there's so many other ways to accomplish that. Instead of charging someone $50,000 and the bondsman gets rich and, you know, you're poor. Your house is up for now, you know, your grandma can't do anything. So yeah.
Yeah. Jeneisha, I'm curious, in the beginning, you talked about passing the torch, you know, in 5 years, you know, you're hoping, you want to be doing something else and you want people to pass the torch to young people. What advice do you have for young people who want to do something, but they feel like, I'm too young, or the issues are too big, or, you know, this fight is too hard? You know, what advice do you have for young people who are trying to be that generation that you pass the torch to?
I would tell them to look at our leaders. Mr. Kwame was 18 when he was spit in the face and pied in the face. Fred Hampton was 21 when he was assassinated by the Chicago Police Department and the FBI. Mark Clark was 20 years old. I think that the revolution is in the hand of the youth, which is why I said from five years from now, I'm technically not going to be a part of the youth anymore. And so I want to pass the baton. I want to pass the torch to the people who are the basis of this movement. The young people are the basis of this movement. And so I would just encourage them to get involved. We look at the Teens for Justice. It was so beautiful to see and them organize thousands of people by themselves.
Yes.
By themselves. And I reached out to them and just let them know I'm here to support. And they did it all on their own. And so I would actually suggest that they, link with people like that. Get involved, plug in with teenage organizations like Teenagers for Justice, I think it's called. Yes. Volunteer, get involved, do what you can, of course, with the permission of your parents, and just do what you can. And I think for other people, for older people, my call to action would to be just show up. And so showing up could look like donating, that could look like volunteering, that could look like becoming a member of one of these organizations. I think we have an obsession with protesting, and we think that is our only option when it's not. You had Malcolm X awakening people with his fiery speeches in the early 60s. You had Dr. King in 1965 negotiating legislation with Lyndon B. Johnson, and we now benefit from the fruit of their labor. And so you had Thurgood Marshall, who sits behind Miss Courtney right there in a picture, who became the Supreme Court Justice in 1967. So you had different people doing different things. You had the Fannie Lou's, you had the Ella Bakers, the Rosa Parks organizing in the background. So you had so many people doing so many different things. And I think now we've accustomed a really unhealthy obsession with protesting in the front lines, and everybody is not built or meant to be on the front lines. And so volunteer, donate, be a part of an organization, come in and give water and give snacks, show up to a meeting, show up to anything that one of these Black owned or grassroots organizations are putting on. So there are so many different ways, and that's my call to action to people who are listening.
I'm so glad that you said that, because one of our viewers asked, could we write letters to our mayors?
Absolutely. I know his email address by heart. It is mayor@nashville.gov. Mayor@nashville.gov. In my experience, they actually do reply back to emails. I would suggest emailing them. If you would like the address, you can just simply Google Mayor Cooper's contact information. It'll pop up. But mayor@nashville.gov, excuse me.
And on that note, who else should they be writing?
Governor Lee. Governor Lee, find out who your elected officials are. Find out who represents your district. Find out who represents your county. Find out who is the senator for your district. So once you find that information, because it looks different for different people depending on where you live, obviously. But find out who those people are. There are so many resources. If you Google "find your representative" on Google, it'll actually pop up. You can put your first, last name and your zip code in, and it'll pop up. So just utilize the resources that technology is giving us.
I have another question from a viewer who enthusiastically says, thank you for sharing, Jeneisha Harris. How can we financially support you or your organization and the work you're doing to change the world?
I am personally sending everybody to the Nashville Community Bail Fund. There are so many protesters who look like me, who are doing the work like me, who do not have the luxury of bail money or a pro bono lawyer. So I would say use those resources to help people like me who are still locked up for bills or bonds that they cannot make. The Nashville Community Bail Fund, you can find them at nashvillebailfund.org. Other organizations like Black Lives Matter Nashville, Gideon's Army, the Waterbird Project, I already said the Nashville Community Bail Fund, Free Hearts organization. And you can simply type these names in, and the donation links will pop up on their website. So yeah.
Well, Reverend Charisna, we've reached the end of the viewer questions. Did you have any questions you'd like to add?
Thank you so much, Anna, for facilitating the questions from the audience. As we close out, I smile when I listen to you, Jeneisha. You really do make my heart leap, because you're truly a gift to the world. And while I smile, my heart also breaks, because at the tender age of 23, you're given the burden to be a target in doing this work. What I'd like to ask you is, reality is there is a tension between the generations, right? So, but what I'm hopeful for in your story is your relationship with Kwame, and it is a representation of what happens when generations come together with the intent to pass the baton, right? And so would you speak a little bit about the importance of generations coming together to walk hand in hand to hear, because I think part of your relationship with Kwame is not, Brother Kwame is not just what you get from him, but it's also what you give to him. So there's this beautiful exchange that happens that's loving and respectful. And so would you share a little bit, for those of us who are watching, why is it so important for us to walk hand in hand intergenerationally?
Absolutely. I think, as I said before, we're fighting the same fight. It's just, it looks different. It talks different. The policies are different, but the system is and has always been the same. And so I think you would think that, we have so many differences because of the age gap. Kwame is 60 years older than me. 60. And you would think that we have nothing in common. But me and Mr. Kwame, we talk on the phone for hours. And it's not just a mentorship, professional, political relationship. He calls me over for dinner. We talk on the phone for hours. When my mom passed, he called and made sure that I was okay and if I needed anything. And so I think not only is it important to have those relationships in regards to activism and organizing, but we really have to get in tune with the family portion of our people. So I think it's important to pass the baton, but I also think it's important to accept the baton.
Great. As we close, I'll start with you, Attorney Teasley. If you would just share closing remarks with our audience today, what are your last thoughts about what's happening in Nashville, the work that you are doing in Nashville, and how can we collectively come together as a city to move racial justice work forward?
Well, my last thoughts are, I thought that Jeneisha would bring it up, but she did not. It was, when I read it, it did something to me. Jeneisha, and I think that's why she got such a crazy response, because Jeneisha posted when she thought she was going to jail, she posted on Twitter, she said, I think she said, I've got warrants, I'm going to turn myself in, and if I end up dead, I did not kill myself. And when I tell you, Jeneisha knows, all lawyers are working, most people working from home, children are here with them, no school. That moved me. I had my kids here, my husband's at work. I called my grandma and said, I need you to watch these kids, because ain't no way I could have lived with myself if this girl would have turned herself in and something happened to her. And it's sad that we live in a world where that's my first thought was, I don't want this girl to die, and it makes me emotional because it scared me that you're doing something good, and I know she ain't no crazy protester. I know she's not doing anything crazy. That made my heart hurt that I thought of Sandra Bland, and I said, I can't have my client be a Sandra Bland. I'm going with her because I need y'all to know I'm watching and the world is watching y'all. You know, I don't need you to think that she's alone. I don't need you to think that like Sandra Bland was in Texas by herself and ends up dead. She has people and we're looking and we're not about to allow this to happen to her. So the way we need to move is where we shouldn't feel that way. I shouldn't feel that way. I shouldn't have that kind of fear. She shouldn't have had that fear in her heart that me just doing the right thing, trying to speak up. It's my right to protest injustices. I shouldn't think that I'm gonna die because of that, or that the state, the very people that should be protecting me, would do that to me, to silence me. So to move forward, my prayer is that this state and that this city show us that they actually care about Black lives and do more than the bare minimum. Show us that we're not, what I'm praying that doesn't have to happen in Nashville is for someone else to die. And then we finally say, okay, enough is enough now. Well, no, enough has to be enough because we already have George Floyd's. So that's what that's my hope and prayer moving forward in this living here.
Thank you so much, Attorney Teasley, for the work that you do in the city of Nashville and the ways in which you protect citizens like Jeneisha Harris, who is on the ground moving justice forward in our city and state. Thank you. Jeneisha, as we close, I want to share with you, at Scarritt Bennett Center, our goal is to shift the narrative around the ways in which white people join this work. For years now, we've heard the terminology white allyship, and oftentimes white people come to the protests and they come to these demonstrations and they come to this work understanding that they're allies. The problem for me personally about the concept and language as white allyship is this assumption that injustice and racism is Black people's burden. It's Black people's problems that white people come to help. And the problem with allyship is it gives white people the privilege to choose if they come to help, how they come to help, and when they come to help. So white allyship for me is the wrong terminology and concept in this work. So we at Scarritt Bennett Center, we're using language like co-conspirator. Co-conspirator suggests that injustice and racism is the work of humanity. It is not the work or problem of Black people. It's the work and problem of all people, including especially white people. But racism is affecting all of our humanity. It is affecting our souls. And so co-conspirator is the language that you don't come to help me, you come to help you. When you come to these demonstrations and protests, when you come to speak against injustice and racism, you're not coming to help the Black people. You're coming to help you and your own soul. And so I want us to close out with you speaking to our white audience tonight. Speak to the ways in which white people take on or should be taking on the responsibility, the burden of dismantling racism in our world and in our city. Would you share a little bit to Jeneisha with our white audience?
Yes, thank God for Twitter. I have the perfect tweet for this question. Teach Mr. Reed tweeted and said that white supremacy will not die until white people see it as a white issue they need to solve rather than a Black issue they need to empathize with. And so, yeah, I think that sums it up perfectly.
Thank you. Again, thank you both for your time, for trusting us on this platform to share your story. And we hope that we can do this again. For those that are watching, there's so much work to do, and there's so many ways that you can join in this work and conversation. If you pay attention to our comment section, we've left links of various different organizations that's been spoken of today, ways that you can support the work that they're doing, ways that you can write to our mayor and governor in terms of change that we need to see in our city, ways that you can participate in the injustice that we are experiencing all over this country, ways that you can eradicate racism, not for Black people, not for white people, for humanity as a whole. God bless you and keep you. And until next time, bye-bye.